Picture this. It's right around noon, the sun's beating down, and I'm out there watering my tomato plants, minding my own business, when out of nowhere, a loud crash hits my fence, followed by a high-pitched scream. Turns out, Karen Simmons, our self-declared HOA queen, decked out in this ridiculous floral getup, had taken a nosedive off a ladder while trying to spy into my backyard. Welcome to the daily soap opera that is Willow Creek. Karen seems to think she rules every blade of grass in this neighborhood, especially on my property. But here's the thing, she has no idea who she's dealing with. Let's just say, I'm not your typical friendly neighbor waving from the porch. What's coming next? It'll have you laughing until your sides hurt. So go ahead, leave a comment. Where you tuning in from? Who else is caught in the madness? It all started on a pretty normal Tuesday afternoon, late May. Our quiet little cul-de-sac was just doing its thing. The sun was high and hot, and I was out tending my pride and joy, a vegetable garden I'd been working on for the past 3 years. I'd just gotten to my heirloom tomatoes when a loud crash, followed by a scream, rang out from behind my fence. I let out a sigh, set my watering can down, and made my way over. I already had a good guess what, or more like who, was behind it. Sure enough, there she was. Karen Simmons, the almighty president of our HOA, sprawled out in the dirt next to a toppled ladder. Her flashy dress was bunched up, and her knees were scraped raw. Not exactly the entrance she was going for. "Zach Carter," she screeched when she saw me. She tried pushing herself up with one arm while the other pointed straight at me like I was guilty of something. "I know you're hiding something illegal in that yard," she snapped. "Why else would you need such a tall fence? It breaks at your rules." Her voice wasn't just loud, it was the kind that carries like a siren down the street, making sure the whole neighborhood hears her meltdown. Now, I kept calm on the outside, but inside? I was boiling. "Karen, you're trespassing," I said flatly. "There's nothing illegal back there, it's just a vegetable garden. And that fence? It's exactly the height allowed by the bylaws. I've checked." I kept my voice even, but yeah, I might have smirked a little watching her struggle to stand and brush off her ridiculous dress. Then I heard her mutter something, kind of under her breath. Mom was right. Without control, you lose everything. That line caught me off guard. But before I could think it over, she limped off, shooting daggers my way as she went. "This isn't over, Zach," she called out. "The HOA will be sending you a formal notice. You're raising concerns." I watched her hobble down the block, probably already crafting her own twisted version of what happened to make herself the victim. Once I got back inside, I sat down at my desk and pulled up the neighborhood security system on my computer. What most people in Willow Creek didn't know was that I'd built the entire IoT sensor network that kept an eye on the place. It's what I do, smart home systems and community surveillance design, but I kept things low-key. I skipped meetings, avoided cookouts, kept to myself. I value my privacy, both personally and professionally. I rewound the street camera feed and there it was, clear as day. Karen dragging a ladder over, propping it up against my fence, and climbing it just to peek into my yard. Not even a little room for misunderstanding. I saved the footage. I had a feeling it'd come in handy soon. Then I got curious and widened my search. And wow, turns out Karen had been busy. Just that week alone, she'd snooped on at least 3 other neighbors, clipboard in hand, jotting down violations. That evening, while I was cooking dinner, there was a light knock at my door. I opened it to find Nancy Coleman, my 60-something neighbor from across the street, holding out a plate of cookies. "I saw the Karen show earlier today," she said with a grin, eyes sparkling with amusement as I let her in. "She's been a nightmare ever since she took over the HOA 3 years ago. Did you know her husband left her because she tried to micromanage his entire life? Word is, she grew up with a super controlling mother who watched her like a hawk. Now she's just doing the same thing to the rest of us." Nancy made herself comfortable at my kitchen island and poured a glass of the iced tea I offered. "Honestly, Zach, someone needs to knock her off that imaginary throne," she said, taking a sip. "She's driving us all nuts with her petty rules. Just last week, she fined Molly and Brent for having hedges that were 2 inches over the limit. Molly's raising 2 kids on her own, working 2 jobs. Who has time to measure their bushes with a ruler? I raised my eyebrows. I hadn't known Molly was on Karen's radar. She always seemed quiet, kept to herself. I've been trying to steer clear, I admitted, leaning on the counter. But she's got her sights locked on me now. Nancy narrowed her eyes. You know, Zach, avoiding conflict just gives bullies more room to act. Karen targets people who don't push back. She's insecure, constantly trying to prove she's good enough, probably still chasing approval from that mom of hers. I let her words sink in while she kept talking. Just wanted you to know, you're not alone. A lot of us are sick of her nonsense. When she left, something caught my eye. On the lamp post across the street, something new. A small device that hadn't been there yesterday. It had a perfect angle of my front door. A fake sensor. Classic Karen, trying to scare me. That night, I sat in my office, fingers flying over my keyboard as I dug into the neighborhood network. That sensor? Totally disconnected. Just for show. But the message was loud and clear. Karen wanted a fight. I leaned back, smiling slowly. All right, Karen. You want to play games? I said to myself. Fine. You're on my turf now. I took a sip of coffee and started laying out a plan. What I didn't know. She was already 1 step ahead, and her next move was about to get way dirtier than I expected. The very next morning, I found a bright yellow paper stuffed in my mailbox. A formal HOA violation notice. The color alone screamed drama. I skimmed it. Apparently, my excessive privacy measures might be hiding unauthorized modifications. An inspection was being demanded within 48 hours. At the bottom, Karen's signature was sprawled across the page in the kind of cursive that looks more like a threat than a name. I folded it neatly and tucked it into my desk instead of tearing it up like I wanted to. If this escalated, and I was sure it would, I'd need proof. That afternoon, my system pinged again. Someone was at the back fence. I pulled up the camera feed. A guy in a cheap suit and a hard hat was poking around, jotting notes on a clipboard. I recognized him. Tom Jenkins, one of Karen's buddies. Ran a barely surviving landscaping company. This wasn't an official inspection. This was surveillance. The moment he tried to unlatch my gate, I activated the sprinkler system. The jets kicked on instantly, blasting him full force. He jumped back, holding his clipboard over his head, shoes sinking into the mud as he retreated. I watched from my kitchen window as he sloshed his way around the house, soaked and cursing. That evening, I got to work. Hacked into that phony sensor Karen had set up. Just as I suspected, a hidden mic inside. It was picking up conversations from way farther than it should have. Karen had been listening in. But the deeper I went, the worse it got. Turns out she had these things all over Willow Creek. Dozens of tiny audio recorders, each one eavesdropping on private talks. She was building a catalog of blackmail fuel, all under the guise of enforcing HOA standards. Next morning, I headed out for coffee and spotted her, parked on the street, pretending to read a newspaper, binoculars in her lap. I didn't say a word. Just went home, typed up an anonymous email. Stop spying on your neighbors. What you're doing is illegal. Someone knows. I hit send. 20 minutes later, my doorbell cam caught her checking the fake sensor, panicked and frantic like she was being watched. Later that day, I bumped into Josh Daniels, our maintenance guy, out in the park fixing a sprinkler. He waved. Said, "Heard Karen's gunning for you now. Welcome to the club. She's had me working overtime for months with no extra pay, threatened to report me if I didn't repaint her porch. Said it counted as community property because it faces the street." As I walked home, I passed Molly, out front measuring her hedges with a ruler and a tired expression. She looked up. "Hey, you're Zach, right? I'm Molly. Karen gave me a violation notice yesterday. Said my hedges were 2 inches too tall. I've got 72 hours or I'll get fined $100. I've got 2 jobs. I don't have time for this." That evening, I caught a glimpse into Karen's office through her window. She was sitting there, back straight, staring at a framed photo on her desk. I zoomed in through the feed. The woman in the picture had the same sharp features. Must have been her mother. Karen clenched her fist and started talking to the photo. This wasn't about the HOA anymore. For Karen, this was something deeper. Something personal. Something old. And the next day? A new twist. My system flagged activity at the front door. When I checked, there was a stack of flyers. Bold letters warned neighbors about suspicious behavior at my address, urging people to report anything unusual. There were no clear accusations, just vague hints meant to stir up suspicion and turn the neighbors against me. I crushed the flyer in my hand, finally losing my cool. Inside the safety of my home, I let out a loud, frustrated yell. But after a few deep breaths, my head cleared. It was obvious. Karen was pushing harder because she felt threatened. I squared my shoulders, walked back to my desk, and stared at my screen. "You think you've won a battle, Karen?" I muttered. "I'm just getting started." What I didn't see coming was the letter that would send the entire neighborhood into chaos. The next morning, right after I discovered those flyers, my phone started buzzing like crazy. Texts, missed calls, more than I'd gotten all year. People I barely even knew from the neighborhood were suddenly reaching out. Some sounded worried, others suspicious. Apparently, Karen had dropped another batch of flyers around Willow Creek overnight, and this time, they were full of wild accusations. One of them screamed, "Alert! Suspicious animal breeding activity suspected at 42 Maple Drive." My address. The flyer claimed neighbors had reported weird sounds and strange smells, hinting that I was running some kind of shady pet operation in my backyard. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so damaging. I didn't even own a dog, let alone an illegal animal breeding setup. When I stepped outside, I saw a few neighbors across the street watching me. Their faces said it all. Some were confused, others clearly concerned. I gave a quick wave, but they all turned away. The feeling of isolation hit me like a brick. The only one who offered even a hint of support was Nancy Coleman, sitting on her porch with a sad little smile. At least I knew she wasn't buying Karen's nonsense. Back inside, I paced the living room, uncertainty creeping in. I had moved to Willow Creek for peace, for privacy, not to fight some neighborhood battle. And for a moment, I actually thought about selling my place and starting over somewhere else. But walking away would just give Karen permission to find her next victim. Maybe Molly. Maybe someone else who didn't have the tools or knowledge to fight back. That thought hardened something in me. I sat down and got to work. I started documenting everything. The fake sensors, the audio bugs, the flyers, the bogus citations. As I reviewed old security footage, I uncovered months' worth of recordings Karen had made. It wasn't just me she was targeting, it was half the block. One video in particular made my stomach turn. Karen, standing on a porch, threatening an elderly veteran with daily fines unless he took down a small American flag because it wasn't the regulation size, approved in the HOA handbook. I added that clip to my growing pile of evidence. But it still didn't feel like enough. Not enough to shut her down for good. That afternoon, there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Molly Parks. She looked anxious, but there was a quiet resolve in her eyes. "She hit me with a $300 fine for my hedges," Molly said, holding out a notice. It was 3 times the original fine. She claims I'm being defiant because I trimmed them myself instead of hiring her landscaper. When I tried to argue, she said she'd put a lien on my house. Her hands were shaking. "I can't afford this. My son's tuition is due next week, and I'm already picking up double shifts." I looked over the notice. Sure enough, it was missing the required signatures from other board members. I looked up at her. "This isn't enforceable," I said. "She's counting on the fact that most people don't know the HOA bylaws well enough to fight back." Molly's shoulders slumped just a bit, the kind of release that comes when someone realizes they're not totally alone. "Nancy said you might be collecting evidence," she added quietly. I studied her for a moment, then made a choice. Want to see what she's really been doing? For the next hour, I showed Molly everything. The hidden microphones, the video of her threatening that elderly resident, the doctored violation notices. As I walked her through each piece, I watched her disbelief shift to shock, and then to full-blown rage. "I had no clue it was this deep," she said. "She told everyone you were running something illegal, maybe even dangerous. I didn't want my kid going near your yard. I'm so sorry I believed her. That evening, I got a formal notice in the mail. It said the HOA was holding a special meeting in 2 days to discuss my so-called violations and the safety concerns surrounding my property. 2 days. That was all the time I had to put together a proper defense. Karen's name was front and center as the lead complainant. The document also listed signatures from 3 of her closest friends, board members who'd all benefited from her selective rule enforcement. Later that night, an alert from my system grabbed my attention. Motion near the side of my house. I switched to the camera feed and spotted Josh Daniels, the community maintenance guy, sneaking along my fence. I was about to trigger the alarm when he looked right at the camera and held up a small USB stick, pointing to it like it was urgent. I disarmed the system and met him at the gate. "Sorry for the spy movie routine," Josh whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "But Karen's watching your place like a hawk, and I can't risk her knowing I'm helping you." He slipped the USB drive into my hand. "It's from the community center's backup system. Karen doesn't know I have access. There's stuff on here you're gonna want to see, especially what she's been saying to the other board members." After he left, I plugged it in and watched. And what I saw, honestly, it was worse than I expected. The footage showed Karen sitting with the HOA board, spinning lie after lie. She said multiple residents had filed complaints about odd smells and noises. Not true. She claimed animal control had visited me, also false. She even alleged that I'd threatened her physically. Total fabrication. Even more disturbing? The footage caught Karen accessing HOA financial records late at night, alone. The camera didn't show exactly what she was doing, but something was off. As the sun went down, I sat there staring out at the street. This quiet little neighborhood I'd chosen for its peace had turned into a war zone. And whether I wanted to or not, I was in the middle of it. "I need something stronger," I muttered to myself. Turns out, Karen was about to give me just that, and in doing so, she'd make the biggest mistake of her campaign against me. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and the whole neighborhood felt weirdly still, like everyone was holding their breath. I'd spent most of the night prepping, organizing everything into a tight, clear presentation. I was doing one last run-through when my security system pinged. There was movement in my backyard. I pulled up the feed and couldn't believe my eyes. Karen. She was back at it, setting up a ladder against my fence, only this time, she had a toolkit, a pair of garden shears, and what looked like a small camera. Just hours before she planned to drag me in front of the HOA, she was trespassing, again, either planting evidence or trying to collect it illegally. I hit record and watched as she climbed the ladder, surprisingly nimble for someone who'd already taken a fall once. She reached the top and aimed her camera straight at my vegetable garden. Then the ladder shifted. She hadn't stabilized it properly. It wobbled, then tipped. Karen shrieked as she and the ladder tumbled backward. This fall looked rough. She landed hard, the ladder crashing down on top of her. Her face twisted in pain, and she grabbed her leg. For a second, I actually felt bad. No one deserves to get hurt, even her. But before I could go outside to check on her, she managed to stand, barely, and limped away, face twisted with pain and rage. 3 hours later, just as I was getting ready to leave for the HOA meeting, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. 2 officers came to the door. "Mr. Carter," the older one said, "we're here about an assault complaint filed by Karen Simmons. She claims you set up a trap on your property that caused her to fall and break her leg. She's currently being treated at Willow Creek Memorial." I blinked, stunned. Then the anger bubbled up. "Officers, I have security footage that shows exactly what happened," I said, keeping my voice even. "She was trespassing. The fall was her own doing." I played the video for them. Karen setting up the ladder, climbing it, aiming her camera, then falling when the ladder slipped on uneven ground. She was trying to record my property without permission, I explained. And this is just the latest in a string of harassment. I showed them the flyers, the fake sensors, the tampered violation notices, everything. By the time I finished, the officers had gone from skeptical to serious. "We're going to need a copy of that footage for our report," one of them said, voice firm. "And if I were you," the officer said before leaving, I'd think about filing your own complaint. For the harassment. And the trespassing. Once they were gone, I dropped into my chair, the weight of everything finally crashing down on me. Karen actually tried to press assault charges against me. Alone in my home, I finally let it all out. What the hell is wrong with her? I shouted, slamming my hand on the desk. I paced the office back and forth, letting the frustration burn off. But slowly, as the minutes passed, my thoughts cleared. Karen had just crossed a line. By filing a false police report, she turned our little neighborhood spat into a legal issue. And the best part? The facts were on my side. I called the hospital, partly because I wanted to do the right thing, but also to document that I had followed up responsibly. A nurse confirmed Karen Simmons was being treated for a fractured fibula. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from Josh. Meeting postponed. Karen's telling people you rigged the ladder. Board discussing emergency measures. Be careful. The next day, I got a certified letter in the mail, this one from Karen's attorney. She was suing me for personal injury, emotional distress, and property damage. They were demanding $50,000 in damages, plus her medical bills. I scanned the letter and immediately forwarded it to my lawyer, along with a full summary of what was going on. Within an hour, I had a response. Don't stress. Clear-cut trespassing case and you've got the video. I'll take care of it. That evening, I reviewed the security footage again. And that's when I noticed something weird. A few clips from around the time Karen fell had vanished from the system. Someone with admin access had deleted them. But I had backups. I'd built the network myself. On the secondary server, I found the missing videos. One clip showed Karen standing beside a black sedan with tinted windows, talking to someone inside before she dragged that ladder over to my fence. I couldn't get a clear look at the driver, but one thing was obvious: her stunt wasn't random. It was planned. And maybe she wasn't acting alone. The following morning, I looked outside, and my front yard was swarming with neighbors. A whole crowd had gathered, murmuring to each other, casting glances toward my house. Right in the middle, sitting in a wheelchair with her leg in a cast, was Karen. She was putting on a full performance, waving her arms dramatically, dabbing at her eyes like she was accepting an Oscar. Only Nancy and Molly stood apart. Their expressions said it all. They weren't buying the act. I took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping out onto the porch. I didn't know it then, but Karen had already set her next move in motion. One that would land us both in court and change Willow Creek forever. 2 weeks later, I sat in the county courthouse, waiting for the hearing in Simmons versus Carter to begin. My lawyer, Grace Bennett, sat next to me, calmly going over our evidence. Across the aisle, Karen was there, cast still on, now covered in signatures from concerned neighbors. She'd even added a neck brace. That was new. She winced every time someone looked at her. Her attorney? Slick eye. Expensive suit that didn't quite fit. He leaned in close to whisper something in her ear. Karen hadn't just filed the lawsuit. She also launched a full-blown smear campaign. She created a Willow Creek Watch page on social media, updating the community about suspicious activity at my address. She never named me, but let's be honest, everyone knew exactly who she meant. Some folks avoided me entirely, crossing the street instead of walking past my house. But others, they were starting to ask questions. When the hearing started, her lawyer put on a show. He painted me as a bitter recluse who'd created dangerous conditions to block the HOA from doing its job. He said Karen was performing a routine inspection when she slipped on a booby-trapped section of yard. Karen sniffled on cue, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Then it was our turn. Grace stood and laid everything out with calm precision. The timeline, the violations, the harassment, the video. The room went quiet as we played the footage. Karen clearly trespassing. Climbing a ladder. Falling when it slipped. Your Honor, Grace said firmly, this isn't a personal injury case. It's an attempt to weaponize the legal system as part of an ongoing campaign of harassment. Ms. Simmons was trespassing. And this video contradicts every single one of her claims. Before the judge could say anything, Karen's attorney jumped in. Your Honor, we believe this footage has been altered. Mr. Carter works in IT. He has the technical skills to manipulate video evidence. He pulled out a flash drive. We have a separate witness video. It shows Ms. Simmons on the sidewalk when the incident occurred. My stomach dropped as the judge instructed the bailiff to play it. On the screen, Karen stood on the public sidewalk, then suddenly fell, just like that. The timestamp lined up, but everything else was off. It was a fake. Grace didn't hesitate. We request a forensic analysis of that video. Even a quick look reveals inconsistencies, shadows don't match the time of day, and the metadata shows clear signs of tampering. The judge leaned forward, eyes locked on Karen. "Mrs. Simmons," he said sternly, "you'd better make absolutely sure your testimony is accurate. Presenting doctored evidence is a serious offense." As we left the courthouse, Karen shuffled by on her crutches, her expression twisted in fury. "This isn't over, Carter," she hissed. "You think you're so clever with your cameras and that slick lawyer. But I've lived here 15 years. These people trust me, not some antisocial tech nerd hiding behind a fence." I kept my cool. Just arched an eyebrow and replied, "You're right about one thing, Karen. This isn't over. Not even close." That night, I met with Josh, Nancy, and Molly in my living room. Our unofficial war room. "She's slipping," Josh said. "Cornered me at the clubhouse today. Said she'd wipe all my fines clean if I testified that I saw you tampering with your yard." Molly opened a folder and slid it across the table. "I work at First National. The HOA has their accounts with us. Karen came in yesterday and withdrew $5,000 in cash. When I asked about the required second signature, she said it was an emergency legal expense the board had already approved." I stared at the document, my mind racing. Why did Karen need $5,000 in cash? The timing couldn't be a coincidence, not after the judge ordered a forensic review of her video. Maybe she was planning to bribe someone. Possibly the person who doctored that footage. Later that evening, I noticed movement in the community park. Karen and her attorney meeting away from houses and cameras. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. Karen was waving her arms, clearly agitated. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable, shaking his head over and over. At one point, she shoved an envelope into his hands. He took it, reluctantly, after glancing around to make sure no one was watching. The next morning, a certified letter showed up from the court. The forensic analysis was in. The video Karen submitted had been digitally altered. The judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice and sent everything to the district attorney's office for review. Possible criminal charges were on the table. I read the letter twice, barely believing it. Then I looked up, just in time to see Karen's car backing out of her driveway at full speed. A suitcase sat in the back seat. "Running away, Karen?" I muttered. I reached for my phone, but a new alert popped up on my screen. My financial monitoring system flagged another major withdrawal from the HOA account. $20,000. I froze, my fingers hovering above the phone. We just stumbled on Karen's biggest secret. The bank alert popped up at the exact worst and most important moment. $20,000 had just been pulled from the HOA's reserve fund, not even a full day after Karen Simmons' lawsuit got tossed. And just minutes before she was caught fleeing town, suitcase in hand. I called Molly right away. She worked at the bank and confirmed it. The transaction had gone through without the required second signature. "I wasn't the one who processed it," she told me. "Karen must have known I'd flag it if I saw it." Next, I rang up my attorney, Grace. "Call the police right now," she said, no hesitation. "This isn't HOA pettiness anymore. This is embezzlement. And her trying to run? That's a big red flag, means she knows she's guilty." Within half an hour, Detective Rivera had put out a bolo for Karen's car. I jumped into the traffic cam system near the interstate ramps and started scrubbing through footage, searching for her blue sedan. Almost an hour later, I spotted it, parked at a gas station just outside town, off the highway. I sent Rivera the location immediately. He responded quickly, officers were en route. While I waited, I sat there wondering, how did things get this far? How did a dispute over a backyard fence end up uncovering financial crimes that might land Karen behind bars? That evening, Rivera showed up at my front door. "We got her," he said simply. "Turns out, They found Karen at a cheap motel near the state line. She checked in under a fake name. Inside her suitcase, a stack of cash, a burner phone, and documents for what looked like a fake identity. For the next hour, I laid everything out for the detective, starting with the first ladder incident, right up to her doctored evidence in court. By the time I finished, Rivera was shaking his head. "I've seen my fair share of neighbor disputes in 20 years, he said, but this is next level." He asked for copies of all my evidence. The DA's office was building a case that now included criminal trespassing, filing a false police report, perjury, falsifying evidence, and embezzlement. Karen Simmons was looking at serious prison time. At the door, Rivera paused. "There's one thing I don't get. What made her come after you so hard?" I'd asked myself that same question more than once. "I think I represented something she couldn't control," I said. "I kept to myself, valued my privacy, skipped her meetings, and built a fence, all perfectly within HOA rules. But to someone like her, that felt like rebellion." The next morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of car doors slamming shut. Peeking through the blinds, I saw 3 police cruisers and an unmarked car parked out front. Officers were already walking up to Karen's house, warrant in hand. Curious neighbors gathered on their lawns, watching as the police started carrying out boxes of paperwork and electronic devices. I spotted Nancy among them and decided to head over. "They've been going at it for over an hour," she told me. Clara texted me, "They found evidence of more financial mess in the HOA books. Karen's been skimming funds for years." Josh came up beside us with paper cups of coffee. "You're not gonna believe this," he said quietly. "They found a whole file cabinet in her office, full of people's personal info, bank statements, credit reports, even some medical stuff." I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Karen hadn't just been nosy, she had been invading people's most private lives. She was collecting secrets. Leverage. By the afternoon, news vans had started pulling up. A scandal like this? It was bound to go public. I politely declined the interviews. As I turned away, I saw Karen's lawyer practically sprinting to his car, a reporter chasing him down. His usual smug confidence? Gone. He looked pale, defeated. Later, I'd learn why. Investigators had uncovered texts showing he knew the video evidence was fake. He might be facing his own charges soon. That evening, as dusk settled over Willow Creek, I finally sat on my back porch, enjoying the calm in my garden for the first time in weeks. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Molly. "Emergency HOA meeting tomorrow. They're appointing temporary leadership. Several people think you should join the board." I actually laughed out loud at the irony. Me, Mr. Leave Me Alone, now being asked to help run the HOA. Another text came in. This one from Rivera. FYI, while in custody, Karen asked for a pen and paper to write an apology. Turns out she was writing threats. She's been placed on suicide watch and is under psych hold. That message hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything she'd done, I didn't take any joy in seeing her mental health collapse. I remembered how she talked to her mother's photograph, the way she tried to control every inch of the world around her. She wasn't just cruel, she was desperate, terrified of losing power. And in the end, that fear destroyed her. Just as I was sitting with those thoughts, an alert popped up on my security dashboard. A vehicle was approaching my driveway. The camera feed showed a government vehicle pulling up. A woman stepped out in a suit, carrying a large envelope. She introduced herself as a representative from the DA's office. "Mr. Carter, we're moving forward with the case against Karen Simmons. We have a few more questions. Would you be willing to come in tomorrow morning to give a formal statement?" As she turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, and the D asked me to personally thank you. Your documentation? It's been a game changer." Back inside, I spread her envelope out on the kitchen table. A questionnaire was included. One line jumped out at me. "In your opinion, did Karen Simmons knowingly commit these acts, or do you believe she was delusional about her authority?" It was a heavy question, one that forced me to think of her not just as an antagonist, but as a person. Just then, my computer chimed. New email. Subject line. Urgent, new evidence found. I opened it. It was from Grace. And what I read made my heart stop. Turns out, the police had found a hidden safe during their search of Karen's house. Inside were 15 years' worth of HOA financial records, all meticulously annotated in her handwriting. What they revealed changed everything. This hadn't been a last-minute grab for cash. Karen had been embezzling from the community since almost the moment she became president. Fake maintenance projects, padded contractor bills, made-up fees that went straight into her personal account. Over time, she'd siphoned off nearly $150,000. But that wasn't the worst of it. She kept a log of every resident who had ever paid her off to ignore HOA violations. Literal bribes, disguised as expedited processing fees. And then I saw the dossiers. One on every single homeowner in Willow Creek. Full of details she could use, financial problems, relationship issues, even private health matters. My name? It was on a different list altogether, labeled Threats to Authority. Next to it were notes. Privacy fence equals challenge. Avoids meetings. Legal strategy failed. Then the final line. Proceed to blackmail using bank data. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen wasn't just obsessive. She was cold, calculating, and had been running a con for over a decade. The next morning, I gave my full statement at the DA's office. When I finished, the assistant district attorney shook my hand. Thanks to your records and the financial documents we recovered, we're moving forward with multiple felony charges. Ms. Simmons will be facing real time. As I left, I felt something unexpected. Not just relief or vindication, but a strange mix of emotions. Justice had been served, sure. But at the core of it all was a woman who had completely unraveled, consumed by her own fear of losing control. 2 days later, we gathered for an emergency community meeting at the Willow Creek Community Center. Just about every single resident in Willow Creek showed up that night. The community center buzzed with shock, whispers, and the occasional outburst of disbelief as the interim HOA board laid out everything Karen Simmons had done. They walked us through a rough estimate of the financial damage and explained the steps they were already taking to recover the money she stole. When I stepped inside, conversations paused. Heads turned. But this time, it wasn't suspicion I saw. It was respect. A few neighbors came up and apologized for ever believing her lies. Some just thanked me for standing firm, for not backing down. As I sat down next to Molly, she leaned over and whispered, "The board wants to make you an offer." I raised an eyebrow. "We need someone who knows tech," she continued. "Someone we can trust to help secure the HOA's digital systems. Would you be willing to serve as a tech advisor?" I chuckled quietly. The irony wasn't lost on me. After all, I'd spent years avoiding HOA meetings like the plague. And now they wanted me on the team? Still, despite my love for privacy, I knew this neighborhood needed help. Real help. Help I could give. The meeting moved forward with real purpose. They voted to bring in an outside firm for a full audit. They introduced new rules, double approval for expenses, clearer violation procedures, and most importantly, real transparency. When the floor opened up, an older gentleman stood up and confessed he'd paid Karen $800 to fast-track approval for his backyard gazebo. His voice cracked with embarrassment. Howard Simmons, the interim president, a retired judge, stood and reassured him, "You're not the problem. You're a victim just like many others." As the meeting wrapped, Howard made one final announcement. Karen Simmons has agreed to a plea deal. As part of it, she'll be making a public apology, right here in Willow Creek. She's required to specifically address the residents she targeted the most: Zach Carter, Molly Reynolds, and Josh Daniels. A ripple of quiet satisfaction moved through the room. "She'll give that apology next Saturday on the community green," Howard added. "Then she'll begin serving her sentence, 8 to 12 years. Saturday morning came crisp and clear. By 9:30, the green was packed. I don't think I'd ever seen that many neighbors in one place before. Right at 10 o'clock, a police cruiser rolled in. Karen stepped out, flanked by 2 officers. She was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the sharp-tongued queen of the HOA. In her place stood a disheveled woman in a wrinkled floral dress, her legs still in a cast, her face streaked with tears and old makeup. She refused help, hobbling up to the podium on her own. For a long moment she just stared at all of us. Her face flickered between anger, shame, and something that looked like exhaustion. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. "As part of my plea deal," she said, "I am required to apologize to the residents of Willow Creek for my actions as HOA president." She went through the statement like she was reading from a manual, flat, emotionless. Not an ounce of sincerity in her voice. When she got to my name, though, her tone shifted, colder, clipped. "I apologize to Zach Carter for attempting to discredit him." There was a pause. The wording was careful, purposefully limited. It told me everything I needed to know. She still didn't think she'd done anything wrong. When it ended, she was escorted back to the cruiser. Then Molly stepped forward. "On behalf of the new HOA board," she said, "I want to promise everyone here that this is a new chapter. One built on fairness, transparency, and respect for everyone's rights, especially their privacy." The crowd erupted in applause. As the cruiser pulled away, something shifted. Neighbors began turning to one another, striking up conversations. People who had barely exchanged hellos were suddenly laughing, chatting, making plans. Willow Creek didn't just survive the mess, it was starting to feel like a real community. In the weeks that followed, the transformation was stunning. My first official act as the neighborhood's new tech advisor? Renaming our community Wi-Fi network to HOA Free Zone. A little joke, but it stuck, and became a symbol of the new era. I also installed a small sign at the edge of my yard. "Private area, no ladders allowed." People loved it, took selfies, shared it online. One family even asked where I had it made. 6 months later, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Nancy. "Barbecue starts in an hour," she said with a grin. "And no, you're not getting out of it. People expect the hero of Willow Creek to show up." She handed me an envelope on her way out. On the front was a logo I didn't recognize. Inside? A letter from a nearby neighborhood, asking if I'd be willing to consult on a new community security system. As I walked to the barbecue later that day, I thought about how life has a funny way of flipping the script. I came to Willow Creek for peace and quiet. What I found was a neighborhood I didn't just live in, I belonged to. At the Green, the grill was fired up, kids were running wild, music played, and everyone was smiling. Molly waved me over to where she was standing with Josh and Nancy. "To Willow Creek," she said, raising her glass. "And to ladders in all the wrong places." So, what about you? Where are you watching this story from? Drop a comment below. And if you've ever had your own HOA horror story, I want to hear it. Because sometimes, the best revenge against a petty tyrant isn't plotting or scheming. It's standing your ground. It's keeping the receipts. It's letting them destroy themselves with their own ladder to nowhere. As Karen Simmons learned the hard way, if you're going to climb up to spy on your neighbors, you better make damn sure the ground underneath you is solid. Thanks for watching. And if you've got the guts, go ahead and click on the next story. You're not going to want to miss it.